Hey everyone, Joe Menza here, and we're back with another acrylic scene. I've got my Strathmore 400 watercolor paper, and I'm using my actual Ron Ranson goat hair brush, which is probably not the brush you want to use for acrylic. It's a little harsh, I think, if you don't wash it really well, but I have several, and I like the soft brushes for acrylic. Actually, I find you can blend more with acrylics, especially if they are stay open longer. But you can see here, like as I blend in, I've got the little water from my jar. Please excuse my water jar if it's not impeccably clean. I paint every day, and someone had made mention about my filthy water jar. And I'm switching to a bucket, by the way. I have a 3-chamber bucket that actually will keep water cleaner. But anyways, you can see here if I take the water, I take a little bit of white here, I'm doing blending. And I think the fun thing is doing skies. Like with watercolor, you kind of do them in a couple minutes, they're done. You don't really want to mess with them. But with acrylic, you can kind of keep shaping and blending and layering and letting it dry. The danger there is if you are doing that, maybe you are never satisfied. And you have to take a step back. I mean, I have paintings where it's like at the, a few minutes in, I'm like, I could have stopped here. That's why I say to record yourself painting, because it's like, I could have stopped here. It was just fine. But for some reason in my mind, it wasn't what I wanted at that moment. So there's that aspect of it. So, you got to take a step back, kind of set a time frame for yourself. These are loose paintings. So we're going to try not to fuss too much. Maybe do something, get somewhere where we like, back away, go on to the next thing. It's just paper, and we're having fun, therapeutic, anxiety relief, that kind of thing. So you can see here I'm kind of blending this in. And I've kind of got, over the course of doing these acrylic paintings, I've done some where I've had really strong and kind of heavy skies, and then I've done some where I've blended them and it's a little more subtle, and I can't really settle in on what I really like. I kind of like all the different styles, but I think a blended sky, when you do a sky scene, kind of looks more realistic. Whereas if you do something what they call painterly, like let's say you're using a palette knife and you're layering it on, it's a cool style and a cool look, but it doesn't really look realistic. So those are a couple of things that you have to kind of decide for yourself what you like better. I did one recently where I blended the sky really nice, and it looked like a photo. So if you're kind of going for realism or you painterly, kind of decide. This is your chance when you're practicing to find a style that you like. Now here I'm taking, I did a little background in the mountain area here. And I'm just kind of tapping in a little. I find that with the blue and the sort of yellow, raw sienna, or yellow ochre, adding a little red, makes for a nice contrast, especially if you're doing like a prairie scene that's like late winter. It's sort of like autumn time when there's no snow on the ground. If you've ever walked by those areas, like what we call forest preserves here, the grass stops being green, it goes dormant, and you get sort of a brown grass, and then you get the tall brown grass with the seedlings on top, almost looks like wheat, and you get, sort of a variation of that between sort of a brown and a yellow and a reddish brown and more of a yellowy tone. And if you can kind of balance those and sort of have a texture out in the field, you can come up with that look of like a prairie type scene. And then once you do that, if you've practiced that, now comes springtime or summer and you start doing your grasses. It's the same thing. There's yellowy grasses, there's bluey grasses, there's very greeny grasses, and you kind of take the side of your brush and you start layering those in. and you come up with a very realistic, nice, toned field rather than just like a solid green or like a green grass with highlights. If you look at the grass in your yard, if you have, yard grass, it's all one color green. But when you're looking out in nature in a field or in the woods or forest or wherever you may be, there is a variety, whether or not, like let's say when I grew up, my father was big on, he used to, he put grass in the yard and it was called the zoysia grass, and he was really proud of it. And he says, "Oh, that's that zoysia grass. Don't walk on the grass." And it was, and then there was Kentucky bluegrass that they put down. That was another premium sort of a grass that they would use. And these different grasses actually have different colors to them. They lean more blue, or they have a really deep green to them. And, there really is something to that. Now, in the fields, I don't know how that works, with grass, how the grass got there. I'm sure seeds, whatever they do. But if you're talking about like a forest preserve, I mean, no one's planted that grass, right? It got there, whatever, from nature, whatever, creation. And you have these different shades. If you look out over a large field, you'll see the greens and the yellows, and I kind of like layering that and using the bristles of the brush to make those grass. So here we're doing that, but we're doing that in shades of brown and earth tones. So you can see here now, I'll probably put a little bit of green in here. Some things are still green throughout the winter months, like your evergreen trees and bushes and things like that. So it's okay to have some of those blended in together. It's also okay to have like a brown tree, because in those instances it kind of offsets. Or if you have fall, you can have like an orangey, yellow, reddish tree. Now here you can see I'm taking this brush and I'm doing kind of a tree over here. And we have a prairie by my house. There, if you look in the distance, it almost looks like there's a line of hills, but it's whatever is in the very distance. So here I kind of made it more like a mountain. I'm just making like a little tree trunk here. Be spontaneous, this is your opportunity to practice. And with acrylic, you can paint over if you feel you need to. You can paint over the entire painting, but since we're using paper, flip it over, do the back, get a new sheet of paper. If you're really tight for paper and you don't really like what's there, you can take your white and you can just paint acrylic over the top. Or you can get a big jar, like from Walmart. I think it was Walmart I got a big jar of like gesso. And you can put that over any paper. And you can use that for your oils. You can use it for your acrylic is fine. And you can go over areas too. Like maybe you're not happy with the sky, or where you did some water and you want to do something else. You can paint over it with white, let it dry, and you have a fresh start. It's not like watercolor where once the white of the paper's gone, it's kind of gone. Although I do find if you're using a little more watery blend on these acrylics, as I'm learning here, and you dry brush kind of on the paper and you leave a little bit of white, it can create a nice effect like watercolor. Here you'll notice in the foliage, I didn't quite cover with the ink with the paint. I didn't quite get the coverage, and it left like little white areas. And I rather like that. So you can leave the white of the paper for that kind of an effect too. That's what makes the acrylic so versatile. You have the quick dry time, which has its pros and cons, and then you have, you can buy slower drying acrylic. But I think it's good for, you could set up wherever, you can go out plein air. You have a variety of options. So here I've just got a little bit of water going through. Now the other one that I did with the river going through, I made the mountain a little lighter and a little more, I think, to the purple side. That's something you got to kind of look at. If you look at mountains in the distance, if you're in an area with mountains, or look up some photos of mountains that are very distant, they look blue. Here I'm just making some more foliage, branches, whatever, leaves on the top of this tree, if there are any leaves. Could be a late leaf dropper. I've got a tree like that, or actually I had a tree like that in front of my house, but for some reason it weakened and it fell down. It always let out its leaves very, very late. Like we had landscapers come by, and they would take up all the leaves, and they would, like, maybe 3 times, like, and they would take the leaves away. And like, even when the snow was about ready to fall, they still had leaves in the trees. See, now I can see here the little bits of white on the paper that have not been covered, and I'm going to leave them. I kind of like the way that looks. It almost is adding like a little sparkly effect. And here you can see I'm using the fan brush. I could personally use a fan brush for like 90% of the painting. I do like using larger brushes. I like using larger, softer brushes for blending. Also, too, always looking where you can get light into the paintings. Now, the values in lighting is going to carry over no matter what medium you're using. Once you learn that in any particular medium, you'll be able to carry that. So that's a very important thing to learn. I know a lot of us that are on YouTube and painting, we don't talk a lot about perspective. We don't talk a lot about composition. We don't talk a lot about, you see people painting and they just pretty much put a nice picture, and you can emulate that. But there are different elements of perspective, composition, value. Value is important because it can set up, different areas of the painting for depth, distance. Color isn't as important, and you can know that from like minimal palette paintings where somebody uses one color. Use a, burnt umber in watercolor, and you'll see how that's your best way to learn about values, is to do a one color painting, and then you'll see how you have to make that work for your values. It's a very, very good thing to learn. And then for composition, there's different, you can look this up online too, but there's your, it's like a checkerboard of your painting. The center being, your center point, and keeping the eyes focused on the middle part of the painting, keeping it engaged, keeping the viewer engaged. And these are all things that you'll pick up over time. But the idea here is to have fun and don't kick yourself if you look at a painting and something seems wrong or off to you. Move on to the next one and say, that was fun. So this is the end of the painting here. I hope you enjoyed it. Here it is with the mat on it. And I will see you next time.